Carlos had been a taxi driver for many years, long enough to know that the people he picked up often carried burdens far heavier than their luggage. He didn't ask questions, didn't pry. His job was simple: drive them from A to B. He listens and never got involved. It was easier that way. But sometimes, as the miles passed by, he couldn't help but wonder what lay beneath the surface: the small glances, the tight smiles, the silence. He'd picked up many women who didn't seem like they were just going somewhere. They seemed like they were running from something. He had driven them all: the drunken college girls, the nervous tourists, the couples arguing in whispered tones. But there was one kind of passenger that haunted him more than the others, the ones who seemed trapped. Their eyes flicked nervously toward the rearview mirror, their bodies stiff as if they were always on guard, even in the safest places. Carlos knew what he was seeing. He had witnessed enough to recognize the signs of someone in distress, but he never intervened. After all, what could he do? He was just a skinny little taxi driver, not a counselor, not a rescuer, and certainly not a hero. He had convinced himself of that over and over. Then, on a warm summer evening, everything changed. It was coming to the end of Carlos's shift when he got the call from a more affluent part of town, where some of the customers are rude and unfriendly. They talk down to you as if you're nothing, even though they give good tips. That doesn't give them the right to talk to you as they like. It felt like a world apart, a place where the distance between him and the passengers felt wider than the gap between the haves and the have-nots. But his job was to drive, and so he did. When he arrived at the address, he saw a blonde-haired lady standing by the curb. She was small, dressed in a dark coat and dark glasses, her face hidden behind strands of hair. Her movements were quick, jerky, almost as if she was trying to avoid being seen. As soon as she opened the car door and slid into the back seat, Carlos noticed three things: the briefcase she held so tightly to her chest, the cold, guarded look in her eyes, and dried smudge of blood under her nose. "Where to?" he asked, trying to keep his tone neutral. "Just drive," she said, her voice tight, barely above a whisper. "Please." Carlos didn't question her. He put the car in gear, and as he pulled away from the curb, he glances into the rearview mirror. He noticed a car coming towards him at lightning pace. She looked behind and saw the car closing in. She was so terrified she shouted, "Can't you go any faster?" She then tried to open the door of the moving car. Carlos said, "Please don't do that. I'm in control of the doors and windows. He won't be able to get to you." He tries to reassure her. "Would you like me to call the police?" "No, don't," she shouted. The air in the car was thick, charged with something he couldn't name. The woman stared straight ahead, her grip on her briefcase never wavering. She was petrified. Her body was coiled like a spring, ready to snap at any moment. They drove in silence for a while, and Carlos stole glances at her in the rearview mirror. There was something about her, a vulnerability he couldn't ignore. He wanted to help, but he didn't want to cross the line. A thought crossed his mind. Since she didn't want him to call the police, he would take her to the nearest police station. Then, without warning, while waiting for the traffic light to change to green, the silence was shattered. Carlos glanced in the side mirror and saw a man, tall, broad-shouldered, a giant of a man, striding between the cars toward them. The woman's body stiffened as he drew closer, and Carlos could see the fear in her eyes. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, go. Just keep driving." But it was too late. He reached the car and started banging on the passenger window and shouting, "You're nothing without me!" The woman flinched, and in an act of panic, she reached across the driver's side and released the door. And before Carlos could react, the man opened the door, grabbed her arm, yanking her out of the car. "No!" she cried, struggling against his grip. Bystanders were shouting at him to leave her alone. Carlos felt his heart race, his instincts screaming at him to do something, anything. But he just sat there, frozen, unsure of what to do. The man dragged the woman away from the car, his voice low and menacing. Carlos could hear the anger in it, could see the way the woman tried to pull away, but her strength wasn't enough. It wasn't his place. It wasn't his fight. But it wasn't just the sight of her, broken, helpless, that made Carlos's blood run cold. It was the realization that he had seen this before, the way she was treated, the way she was powerless against him. And in that moment, Carlos knew that he couldn't walk away this time. He couldn't just drive off. He needed to do something. Carlos quickly glanced around the taxi. His eyes landed on the baseball bat tucked between the seats. He'd kept it there for years, just in case, for the unpredictable situations that could happen in his job. Without thinking, he grabbed the bat and threw open the door. The man was holding onto the woman's throat with his back turned. "Get your hands off her!" Carlos shouted. The man whipped around, his eyes narrowing as he saw Carlos approaching. He stood his ground, but Carlos wasn't backing down. He swung the bat, aiming for the man's ankle. When it connected, he screamed in agony. The man limped back to his car, turned around, and drove back in the direction of which he came. Bystanders applauded Carlos for his bravery. If you find this story interesting so far, please show your support by giving it a thumbs up, comment, share, or even consider subscribing. It helps the algorithm to recognize us. Thanks a lot. And before I forget, let us know where you're listening from in the comments. Let's continue. The woman was still on the ground, gasping for air, her body trembling. Carlos stood there, the bat still in his hands, his chest heaving. He didn't know what to say. He wasn't a hero. He had never seen himself as one. But in that moment, he felt good that he had done something. He stopped an assault and possibly saved a life. She didn't say anything as she crawled back into the car, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock. She sat silently in the back seat, still clutching her briefcase, her body trembling like a leaf in the wind. Carlos got back into the car, but neither of them spoke for a long time. The weight of the moment hung in the air, thick and heavy. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice strained. "I don't know what I would have done." Carlos didn't respond. He wasn't sure what to say. What could he say? "Where to?" he asked, his voice low. She didn't answer immediately. She was staring out the window, lost in thought. Then quietly, almost as if she was speaking to herself, she said, "Take me back home." Carlos didn't argue. He knew where home was. He didn't need her to say it. When they arrived, the woman hesitated before getting out of the car. She glanced at Carlos one last time, her expression unreadable. "Thank you," she said again, but this time there was a sadness in her voice, something that didn't quite reach her eyes. Carlos then said, "You shouldn't go back," she replied. "He's right, I'm nothing without him." Carlos watched her walk up the driveway, the weight of the night pressing down on him. He knew she wasn't going to leave him any time soon, not tonight, not tomorrow. He could see it in the way she walked, her shoulders hunched in defeat. As the car drove away, Carlos couldn't shake the feeling that he had done something important, but he also knew that it wasn't enough, not by a long shot. The ride was over, but the questions, the guilt, the feeling that he had failed to truly help lingered with him as he drove home. Sometimes, Carlos thought, there was nothing more you could do. Sometimes all he could do was drive, but this time was different. Carlos saw the rage in the man's eyes before he drove off. He knew it wasn't over by a long shot. He stopped at the police station and reported the incident. He escorted the police to the address. The police drove up the driveway. Through the glass door, they saw the lady laying on the floor, 3 terrified children standing over her cuddling each other, and the gigantic figure of a man standing over her as if she was his prey. They ordered him to open the door. They put the cuffs on him and called the ambulance. The lady was in a coma for 2 days. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more insightful content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest videos. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. It's free to subscribe. Stop violence against women and girls.